Tension on deck.
Hey, Ron, how you doing? Thanks for having me back.
Hey, Joe, how are you? Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Joe Courtesis, to the show. For those who weren't paying attention, Rob is off tonight, enjoying himself, had some plans, so he took the night off. So I reached out to a good friend of the podcast, a friend of mine, Joe Courtesis. Joe was on episode 48 of the Executive Perspective, where he did an interview and gave us an overview of his career in the NYPD and post-NYPD. So when I was looking for a co-host, I gave Joe a ring. I said, hey, Joe, what are you doing on the 15th? He made himself available. So that was great. Then he hit me with, hey, what's the show topic? I'm like, Joe, that's like 4 weeks out, 3 weeks out. We don't usually pick the topic until that weekend, because we kind of stay with the news cycle on what we're doing. And so Joe made a suggestion due to his background, his expertise, which we'll get into a lot deeper, that we do a show on facial recognition, and sent me some information. I did some looking through everything, and that's an interesting topic. It's not usually, it's a little different from our usual format, because we're not staying in the news cycle and talking about like current, especially like NYPD centric topics. This is completely across all of law enforcement throughout the world, not even just the United States, throughout the world. And there's a lot of questions. A lot of people don't understand what facial recognition is. Joe suggested, let's talk about the cases that didn't go right and why they didn't go right. So we're going to get pretty deep into why things don't go right with these investigations, the uses of facial recognition, what it really is, and talk about the civil libertarians' views on it and their concerns on violations of possible civil rights and things like that. So we're definitely going to touch on all of these things. But for now, Joe, why don't we just remind people who you are, real brief, and why you're an expert in this topic, in this subject, actually.
Excellent. So those who didn't attend the last podcast, I'm Joe Courtesis. I did approximately 27 years with the NYPD, retired as a full inspector like Ronnie. Ronnie and I actually came on the job together. Hey, we got Ralph Salento. Ronnie and I actually came on the job together, and we went up the ranks together too. I think we got promoted to every rank together.
Yep.
And
up to captain. Yep.
Up to captain. And then we went different paths, but
yeah, I took the slow road.
Yeah. I didn't take the fast track. I don't, but we both.
Fast track doesn't. Ralph's on the air. The fast track doesn't exist anymore, right?
That's right. So my career consisted of running, being a precinct commanding officer for about 7 years. I had the 106 and I had the 105 precinct. I then went on to be the executive officer of the chief of department's office, where I oversaw the CompStat process for a little while. From there, I took over the Central Investigations Division, and then I got the privilege of ending my career as the commanding officer of the NYPD's Real-Time Crime Center. So it was in this particular position where I started getting involved in the facial recognition end. When I walked in there, Ron, facial recognition right at that moment in time became extremely controversial. There were some incidents that occurred, and we'll get into those statistics in a little while, that created serious concern regarding the use of it in law enforcement. So much so that I wound up creating working with the legal bureau and communicating the policy for the NYPD regarding facial recognition, and as such, when things got really bad across the country with it, I got a phone call from the BJA and the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and they put together a group of subject matter experts around the country to investigate this problem And in the end, we actually spent about a year looking into this, and we produced a national policy template for the ethical use of facial recognition in law enforcement. So I guess that's my qualifications to speak about this.
Well, I think you got a little bit more than that, right? And talk about a little bit about what you're doing in your afterlife.
Yeah. So since retiring, I started a consulting business, J Core Consulting, where I went out and I helped the law enforcement agencies actually stand up facial recognition sections throughout the country, help them communicate their policies. In addition to that, I co-founded the facial recognition investigative consulting company with Ralph Salento, where we're training detective investigators on how to properly vet a facial recognition lead when they receive one. And now currently I am the Senior Vice President of the Law Enforcement Division for 3SI Security. So a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think I think I'm busier retired, Ron, than I was on the job.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like it. You're keeping yourself busy. I know when I talk to you, you're in a hotel here, you're in a hotel. It's same thing with Tony Raganello, who's been on the show a few times. He's going around the country and speaking on public order. Tommy Joyce and Pete Faselli from the 10-4 Tavern go around a lot talking about technology, and Pete with the leadership. So real interesting stuff. And so again, this was your idea. I took a look at everything and said, yeah, it's interesting. I think people are going to find the conversation interesting, and people will understand limitations. People will understand how the police aren't perfect and they make mistakes. Some of them intentional. I always talk about it on the show. There's two types of mistakes. There's two types of mistakes, right? There's a mistake of the mind and a mistake of the heart, right? So a mistake of the heart means I was trying to do the right thing and I made a mistake. A mistake of the mind is I knew I was doing it wrong and I did it wrong anyway. And so those are the ones that are problematic, right? And so we're going to get into some of those mistakes with some of the cases that we're going to talk about. But if you want to just, in layman's term for the audience, a lot of law enforcement people, in the chat and that watch on YouTube. So you want to just give just like a layman's definition of exactly what facial recognition is without getting too deep into it.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to do, but I'll do my best stab at it, because facial recognition consistently gets thrown in a bucket of what our civil liberty unions and attorneys will call surveillance. When in reality, the way we're using it in law enforcement mainly, and particularly in the NYPD, we use facial recognition in post-investigatory situations. A crime has occurred. We go to the crime scene. Years ago, we used to look for fingerprints, and we still do, but now we canvass for cameras. And there's not a case we don't canvass for cameras for. And then what are you doing with that digital evidence when you get it? So think about that image or that video clip that you're getting from somebody's Ring camera or from some store CCTV. What happens with that? And you wind up, I look at that like a latent print. We need to figure out who does this image belong to, just like we need to figure out who does that latent print belong to. And now that typically gets sent into a group of specialists inside of a law enforcement agency that will run that through an algorithm and then try to come up with some type of a lead, that is generated from the algorithm that they can move forward and send out to the detective for further investigation. But what I would like to point out is there are two things you should really understand here. There's facial recognition and there's facial identification. When I talk about facial recognition, I'm talking about the technology and how that technology takes that probe image, converts it into a biometric image template, and compares it to a repository of images. It's like zeros and ones. It really breaks it down into some science. Facial identification is, we've been identifying, when I say we, law enforcement, we've been identifying images to faces long before there was an algorithm around to help us. This is not new to us. We get these images and we try to figure it out. We use other ways. We used to have witnesses come in and look at photos for hours. We would release it to the media for public attention and to see if we can get any tips in from Crime Stoppers. Many, many ways that we try to identify images to faces. Facial recognition, the technology, is now one step in that facial identification process. And we have to remember it is just a step in the process. Yeah. And this is where we have been tripping ourselves.
And when people think, even people in law enforcement think about facial recognition, and we had, we had this conversation, people start thinking like of the Jason Bourne movies, right? And tracking people through everything else. So I'm going to throw up a quick video of what, the Hollywood version of the Hollywood thoughts on facial recognition. So let's take a look at that real quick. And then we'll break it down a little bit further.
So a lot to break down there, Ron. I mean, if we were only that good, number one, and TV does a great job of making it look like we have greater abilities than we do. When you looked at that video, it gave you the impression that we're collecting faces from crowded locations, creating some national image database. I think there was one where it showed a guy in his hospital bed, an elderly man in his hospital bed, and then they matched it up to a yearbook photo, as if law enforcement has copies of every yearbook photo on the face of the planet. But more importantly, what makes that extremely problematic is you're going to hear from everybody, and we'll probably get people chiming in the chat here. Facial recognition is just a lead. Facial recognition is just a lead. And that you'll hear that over again. Treat it like an anonymous tip. But look at the note. Stop right there. Look at the language right here. Targets identified. That don't sound like a lead to me. We look over here. It's going to say match found. Match found doesn't sound like a lead to me. That sounds like a positive identification. And then this one over here, same thing. Match confirmed. So these shows give the impression that law enforcement make arrests solely based on the results of facial recognition technology, that they make identification solely on this. You forgot to, the last time you forgot to turn that on.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
So it's an important thing to point out, because when it comes to facial recognition, there is training out there, but that training typically goes to the people who own and operate the facial recognition systems, not to the people who are charged with proving the true identity of the subject. Remember, that lead is produced over here, and then given to a case detective. And that case detective is then tasked with, trying to prove, confirm that identity.
A little later on, you're going to give us maybe a little bit broader spectrum, nationwide, even outside the United States, on certain policies and procedures, because the New York City Police Department has a little more restrictive policy than some other jurisdictions. So let's take a look, since we have a good NYPD following, right? So the NYPD patrol guide procedure, which you had input in putting together, correct?
Correct.
So here's the scope of the facial recognition technology, right? And there's a patrol guide. It's a 4-page procedure. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but facial rec technology enhances the ability to investigate criminal activity and increase public safety. The facial recognition process does not by itself establish probable cause to arrest or obtain a search warrant, but it may generate investigative leads through a combination of automated biometric comparisons and human analysis. That's exactly what you were saying.
Sounds good on paper.
Right. So these are some definitions, right? A probe image is an image of an unidentified person obtained by assigned investigators from witnesses, victims, or other reliable sources. Again, going back to what you said, doing a video canvas, cell phone video, something, somebody posts something like we see all the time on Instagram or on Twitter or X, whatever, and you're able to pull that unidentified person's picture, that becomes a probe image, right? So here's something that's important, and where people think that, like you said, we have all this access to everything that's out in the internet. A photo repository is a controlled and limited group of images against which the probe image is compared. The photo repository only contains arrest and parole photographs. It's stored in the designated and approved law enforcement database, and access is restricted to authorized users. So again, not everybody has access to it, and it is only arrest and parole photographs. So if the person was never arrested and never put on parole, they're not going to get a hit in the facial recognition search. But here's like the big caveat that you say is really important, and what differentiates us also from other jurisdictions is that background check, right? So someone from the Real-Time Crime Center facial identification section, right, evaluates the reliability of a potential match. So you have a probe image, goes into the photo repository, they do the algorithms, boom, you get a match, right? Quote unquote match, right? So now an investigator from the facial identification section does the probe, right? Does an assessment of available information about the potential match and relevant details of the investigation. So they are doing an investigation on the possible, right? On the hit that they get from the photo repository. So you want to get a little bit
more so let's unpack this a little bit. I'm going to start with the photo repository real quick and then move into the background check. So where the NYPD uses just arrest and parole e-photos, other police departments throughout the country have access to DMV photos, and also have access to some social media scraped photos through a company that provides that. So it's not, our policy is exclusive to the NYPD when it comes to the repository. And now on the background check, this is a big differentiator between the NYPD and I think almost everyone else, with the exception, I would say, of Arizona DPS, because Arizona DPS modeled us pretty good. Their investigators do a background check before they put that lead out. And this is a very broad statement background check, but this is a soup to nuts check. You get a potential match that comes in, a potential candidate. They're going through that candidate's social media images or social media profile. And Ralph, I mean, Ron, I could do a 2-hour stand-up comedy routine just showing you some of the things people put in their social media. But the point I'm making here is you go through everybody lives on social media. You go through their social media, you're going to find out that they were away at the time of the crime. Or if I was accused of a crime right now, I'm clearly on this podcast. So you'll find an alibi. But more likely, these guys are bragging about it. So they do the social media, they do a criminal background check, they look at vehicles, LPR data, a whole bunch of information, and they don't send out that lead until they have something in addition to the facial recognition algorithm. They do 2 steps. The facial recognition algorithm will produce a lead. They do something that's called face morphological analysis. They've all been trained in identifying faces and the 19 distinct portions of the face. And then they do a background check before they send out that lead. It's pretty thorough.
Right.
NYPD does a pretty good job.
When they follow the protocols. We'll talk about that.
When everything's followed appropriately.
Right. All right. So here's what you're talking about too, the visual comparison.
Correct.
Right. So that's when the facial identification at the real-time crime center investigator visually compares differences, similarities. So this is exactly what you just talked about, right? And then you have a possible match candidate. So a potential suspect who was identified through a complete facial recognition analysis, which includes facial recognition technology, visual comparisons, and a background investigation, and the supervisor's review. So the possible match candidate is after it's been vetted. Not just it pops up like we see on that video, match found, right? Now you take that match and you do the background investigation, and then a supervisor reviews the detective's background investigation, right? So
yeah, let me just pause you real quick. It doesn't come up with a match to just one person. It comes out with a candidate list. So there will be a group of people that that image potentially matches to. So that investigator is looking through multiple images before they narrow down on one potential lead.
Okay. And so then here's the important thing also. A possible match candidate shall be treated as an investigative lead only. It does not by itself establish probable cause to make an arrest, obtain a search warrant, right? Corroborating information must be developed through additional investigation by the assigned investigator. So again, there's the emphasis on that. And
this
then go ahead.
Is where it all breaks down. Not necessarily with the NYPD, but yes, there is a case where it did. But everywhere else, this is where it breaks down, and we'll get into that in about a minute.
And then there's the always and everlasting in every guide exception, right? So the use of facial recognition technology that compares probe images against images outside the photo repository is prohibited. So they're not allowed to use other photos unless approval is granted for such analysis in a specific case for an articulable reason by the chief of detectives or deputy commissioner of intelligence and counterterrorism. So where does this come from, and what's the real meaning behind it?
All right. So what's happening here?
I open that door. Go ahead.
You did open this door. What's happening here is this is a catch-all to stop detective investigators from procuring their own facial recognition tools outside the scope of the policy of the NYPD. The policy of the NYPD, which we didn't really get into too much detail about, is all facial recognition searches are conducted by one unit, the facial identification section. So every detective that has a case has to forward that potential lead to the facial identification section for further review. The NYPD does a great job of tracking a footprint of that evidence. The case detective will get that image, they'll upload it into the ECMS case management system. And there is a DD5. Those of you on the cold warrant from New York, a DD5 is like a complaint follow-up report. There is a DD5 in the case management system specifically for a facial recognition request. So they'll hit a drop down, and they're asking for a facial recognition request, they'll upload the photo and they'll hit send. That shows up on the queue of the case detective in the facial identification section. So there's a complete trail of custody of this. So why is that important, Ron? It's important for disclosure, so that when the case goes to trial, the defense knows that facial recognition was used, and everybody knows. Somebody can defend themselves in this particular case. So it's very well done. However, if detectives are using facial recognition outside of that controlled environment, well, then it may not be known that they're using it. And the databases have to be put into question, the integrity of the database that you're searching. Well, think about mugshots and parolee photos. Those are confirmed identities. We know who those people are because their identity has been proven through fingerprints. So that image belongs to Ron Layson or to Joe Courtesis. So when it potentially leads, we know what we're dealing with. These other databases, well, what's the confirmed identity on them? What are you searching against? And we'll get into this in a little bit. I don't know if you want me to go there now, but
what part?
Just companies coming in and offering like free trials, to.
No, let's talk about that once we do the NYPD case, because
Okay.
that kind of it also answers Mikey Shear 123. He's curious about companies providing the software and where the data centers are, unless that's what the fusion centers are, and that's not. There are private, and you're going to get into that. The private company that houses more data from the internet, a much broader database. But Terry Manane has a question. Does IAB use this to ID cops in their cases?
I don't know. I would believe so. I don't see why they wouldn't have access to tools that the rest of the department has. But I never had IAB reach out to me to assist them in a case. But I would be shocked if they didn't, quite honestly.
Yeah. So yeah. So all right. So that's the baseline of the procedures of the NYPD. Like we said, in other jurisdictions, they have they're given more latitude to use outside vendors and things. You know what? Go ahead. Let's talk about Clearview AI.
All right. So Clearview, one of the main reasons for that statement that Ron had put up there previously and on investigators will not search against non-approved repositories is there some companies out there will provide, to try to get a contract with a law enforcement agency. They may try to backdoor their way in and provide a free sample or just let somebody use it to see if they like it, or free trial. We experienced that in the NYPD. I would say, I think it was 2018. I get a phone call from then Chief of Detectives, Bobby Boyce, and he asked me if I had heard of this company called Clearview AI. And at the time, I did not know of them. He goes on to explain to me that they're a facial recognition company that searches against scraped social media images. And I found that interesting, and I wanted to know why he was bringing it up to me. And he let me know that there was some detectives, and I believe it was in the grand larceny division, that were using this technology. And we both found this disturbing at the time because nobody is supposed to be using facial recognition outside of the internal protocol. So I called in the CO of the grand larceny division at the time and the detective, and they came in with the vendor from Clearview AI. And the vendor came up to me, took a picture of me with his phone and ran me through the algorithm. And he found 6 potential matches of me, and all 6 of them were me. And Ron, every single photo I have never even seen before. These were images that were taken of me that, I didn't even know they were taken. These were images of me. You do 7 years as a precinct commander. Think how many Cop of the Month awards you give out, and the local papers taking pictures. So these were photos I have never seen before, but 100% me in uniform and quick and accurate. And I was very impressed with the technology. I'm not going to deny that. So that being said, I told them when we were done, I got good news and bad news. I go, the bad news is you guys have to stop using this. And the good news is I like it, and I'm gonna confer with our legal bureau and make sure we have the legal authority to be searching through those images. And if we do, we'll create a policy for how it's going to be used and executed in the NYPD. What I didn't know is how widespread that was being used in the NYPD at that time, and it made our policy look very porous. But needless to say, we identified the problem. It wasn't like an outside agency identified it. So the policy worked to some degree, and we were able to get in front of it.
And so, like, Clearview AI is one company. There's others, I'm sure. And the use of this, and this will come up later, but is only supposed to be for law enforcement purposes.
That's what Clearview claims, and Ron, that's concerning. Do you agree?
100% concerning.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, I can give you my thoughts on it, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
No, I mean, we talked about it briefly, and my concerns are 100% the same as yours. You have people that are out, and I mean, listen, we have 50A, and we have all this other stuff where police officers can be identified by getting their shield number or their name or things like that are publicly accessible when you see somebody in uniform. But we do have people that are out there that, and not just the NYPD, in the federal government, in all kinds of agencies that are working in an undercover capacity. But they also may have had social media prior to going into that undercover capacity in the NYPD, as well as I think federal. We had I sat in with Pete Viselli last week on the 10-4 Tavern, and we had an ATF undercover agent on as the guest. And, but he also worked for other agencies, police department, the ATF as a non-undercover also. So, it would be concerning that if you have nefarious people that have access to Clearview AI or other, we don't want to keep pointing out Clearview AI, but they come up in one of the cases. They just come up in one of the cases, and we're not saying that they're doing anything nefarious. But if anyone has access to that, you could take a picture of someone, if you were, a criminal in a criminal enterprise or whatever, and take a picture of somebody running through the thing, and their pictures are going to come up from their police academy graduation, from if they got Cop of the Month because they were a proactive cop, and they got a Cop of the Month award at some community council meeting, and the Queen's Patch put it in their local online newspaper blog, and now it's in the internet and it's captured in the internet. Because, like you said, you can scrub whatever you want personally from the internet. You're never scrubbing the internet. Once it's there, it's captured, and they have these things. And so you could have people and have them identified as police officers, and their lives are 100% now in danger.
Serious danger. And you made a good point. You could scrub your social media, and I'm going to repeat what you said. Clearview is a great product. It's fantastic, and I'm not accusing them of doing anything wrong. They just happen to be the company that everybody knows of. But if I understand Clearview's business model correct, they grab images from open source social media, and they create their own proprietary database as a result. So if you, Ron, decided tomorrow you wanted to clean out your entire social media and take all your photos down, well, those photos have already been put into a different database and are available. So you're 100% right. My biggest fear is this tool getting into the hands of non-law enforcement. And if we feel that is happening, I would highly recommend we reconsider our entire undercover process, and reevaluate how we use and deploy. And I would even consider eliminating it. That's how worried I am about it.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, I don't have an alternative for it, but it's pretty scary that we can't.
It's scary. Could you imagine? Like, we had the undercover ATF agent, and he's infiltrating, biker gangs. Very easy for them. Take a picture, run it through it. Now he comes up as a prior DEA agent or prior, local cop before he went federal. Yeah. Whatever the case may be. And, and now he's being identified through facial recognition, that they don't even have to take a picture with a cell phone. And, in their biker clubs, they got surveillance inside, and they just go and take their own clip from there and run it through and whatnot. And just to answer Lily's one of our regular followers. Well, would you say AI facial recognition is better than a photo? What if the victim was showing only one photo of the perp? First of all, you can't just show one photo, Lily. We call it a six-pack for a reason, because there has to be 6 photos in a photo array that you show civilians. You cannot show a victim one photo and say, "Is this person the person?" It's too leading.
Yeah, so they way too leading. You would only do something like that, Lily, in a confirmatory identification, like your uncle robbed you. Well, is this your uncle? Yes, that's my uncle, because you know that person for a considerable amount of time. And then even in, Ron, not to interrupt you, but even in a photo array situation, it's not always advisable to do a photo array with a facial recognition lead. I'm not saying not to do it at all, but the value of that is, and I'll get into the details of why the value of that is questionable.
Yeah.
In about a minute.
All right. So you want to move on to some of the cases? Talk about some of the cases that involve it. Go ahead.
I would like to go. Maybe let's start with a high-level overview of some of the cases that went wrong, and what do the stats show us right now?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
So right now we have what we know about is there have been 12 cases that we know of right now where a facial recognition lead has led to a wrongful arrest. And those 12 cases have been incredibly sensationalized. And those are the ones we know of. Keep in mind, not everybody uses facial recognition like the NYPD and documents every step of the way that it was used. But out of the ones we know of, there are 12 cases, and the demographics of those 12 cases are quite concerning. When you look at it like this, these are the statistics. We have, out of the 12 cases that have gone wrong, 9 of them have been African-American males. 1 has been an African-American female, 1 a Caucasian male, and the most recent is a female Caucasian out of North Dakota, which we'll discuss that case today as well.
Right. And then just
wrong net.
Before you go any deeper into that, Joe, when you sent me these numbers, I said, come on. We've been using facial recognition for 10 years or more. And how could there only nationwide have 12 cases known? So I did my little, Google searches and whatnot, and asked, Grok and AI and all this other stuff. And to be honest with you, 12 was the highest number I came up with when I did those searches. So, your knowledge, your internal knowledge of data that you get from these other departments, you're putting 12 out there. To be honest, the most I could find on doing Google searches was 10, which I found really low.
Yeah. I've been following this really, really closely, Ron, for the past 10 years almost. And I'm going to tell you why and keep this up for about a minute. I'm going to tell you why this concerned me. In 2018 or 2019, we bought a new facial recognition algorithm, or we were testing a new facial recognition algorithm. And the prior algorithm was dated in 2011. So we did not upgrade that from 2011 to like 2018 or you know what I'm saying? So it was a big time difference. And in that time period, these algorithms made leaps and bounds in advancements because they introduced neural networks, AI, to help strengthen and build these algorithms a whole lot stronger. So what concerned me about that was we decided to test out this new algorithm, and I had my sergeant and a couple of detectives come up to me super excited. And they're like, hey, boss, you don't understand. This is incredible. This is like a fingerprint. We're going back to old cases right now, and cases that we didn't get any potential leads on, and we're getting these great leads. And I got really concerned when that happened because I said, hey, wait a second. You know that this is still just a lead, right? I mean, we're still doing our full investigation. I was afraid of cognitive bias. I was afraid of automation bias. I was afraid that these systems would be so strong that it would create weak detectives. It would, you know, once you start believing in the technology, you stop doing some of the checkpoints that you might have to do. So they assured me, no, we're still doing it. I said, all right, well, I'm going to create a checklist. You better check every box. You know what I'm saying? I want to make sure this gets done as a standard now. Fast forward 2 years later, Ron, I'm attending a conference down in Florida. It's an identity conference, and there is a group of scientists from a lab called SCIAC. And this is a DHS study that was published in 2021. And then there's also another forensic study that agrees with this, that they did an evaluation of the algorithms before and after AI was introduced. And what they found is these new algorithms are first of all, the algorithms went from almost 70% accurate to almost 99% accurate. But let me explain what this 99% accurate means. It's 99% accurate when all conditions are ideal. When the probe image is a quality probe image, and if I could draw a giant end here, and the matching image you're looking for is in the repository. So if you have both of those, you got a 99% chance of the person you're looking up to show rank number 1 out of 1 million photos, out of 10 million photos. Pretty incredible. Here's where the problem comes in with the new algorithms. If you have a quality image and the matching image is not in the repository, well, it's not going to tell you they're not there. It's going to produce the closest looking dude. You know what I'm saying? It's going to produce a practical doppelganger. And now this is where we have the problem. This is the strengthened algorithms didn't make us stronger. They actually made us weaker in a way, because now we have to do a much more due diligent effort to make sure those are not the same person, or those are the same person or not the same person. And you got to do a pretty intense investigation. So what I noticed was these wrongful cases are more prevalent since the algorithms have gotten better.
Yeah, because I was looking for, you know, trying to find statistics, and you know, I found a 2018 MIT study that showed 35% error rate for dark-skinned women, but less than a 1% for lighter-skinned males. But I said it's 2018. You know, 8 years ago, and this technology is a lifetime.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they're the governing body that tests these algorithms out. And when they do that, they test every single algorithm. So your son could be building an algorithm in his basement. If he wants to know how well it's doing, he could submit it to NIST for evaluation. So when NIST does this overall broad evaluation of their algorithms, some of them are going to perform like shit, Ron, and some of them are going to perform really, really well. The top algorithms show undetectable differences between demographics. But when that report came out, they picked the algorithms that did not perform well and labeled the entire industry as biased in those categories. Sort of like in 1972, when the Ford Pinto, you crashed into the back of it, it exploded. They felt all cars will blow up if you crash into the back of them. And that really wasn't the case. So, but these statistics, now I'm going to ask you a question on these statistics. What do you think when these statistics come out? How do you think law enforcement, the politicians, and even the tech industry are going to react to this? What's the problem? What went wrong?
What went wrong?
Well, I'll lead you a little bit.
Yeah, lead me a little bit, John.
I'll lead you a little bit. It screams that the algorithms are potentially biased.
Oh, right.
So it screams that the algorithms are potentially biased. And then when you cherry pick a few of those reports out of NIST, it's easy to make that argument and say the algorithms are biased. And the true question is, are the algorithms biased? Or is there another problem going on here where these wrongful arrests are slipping through a different era that might be happening? And have we explored that at all?
Yeah. Well, we're going to look at two African American male cases, and we're going to show where it wasn't bias that made the wrongful arrest. It was the follow through on the investigative lead and treating it as such. So let's move into that. Get rid of this. So let's talk about Nijeer Parks. I know you have a lot of knowledge with this. You want to do a little disclaimer on this up front?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you're starting with Nijeer, because out of the 12 cases, in my opinion, this is my opinion, Nijeer Parks is the worst. I mean, we made every mistake we could possibly make on this particular case, and it was so easily correctable. So you want me to walk you through this case a little bit?
No, I'll show a video.
Okay.
I'll show a video. It's a few minutes long. So it's a video I pulled off of YouTube. Somebody brought up earlier that there's videos on YouTube about these cases. This is one of them that I pulled off. So this will run you through the media's and Nijeer Parks version of the case, and then Joe, you can get into some pretty deep details because you were involved, actually. So let's take a look.
Were serious: unlawful possession of a weapon, resisting arrest, aggravated assault. After police responded to reports of a theft at a Hampton Inn in Woodbridge, New Jersey, the suspect drove away, hitting a police car, and police claim almost running over an officer. Using cutting-edge facial recognition technology, police quickly arrested Nijeer Parks, a 31-year-old Patterson resident. The only problem? Nijeer Parks was innocent.
How many years are you facing? The last time I went to court, they gave me an 8 with an 85 offer, which is like 6 years.
6 years for a crime you didn't commit?
Yes.
At the same time the crimes were being committed at the Hampton Inn in January 2019, Parks was 30 miles away in a Western Union, sending money to his fiancée. But police found what they say was a fake driver's license at the scene, and using the photo on the ID, got a facial recognition match to Nijeer Parks. With seemingly no other evidence, a judge signed a warrant for Parks' arrest.
The thing that is so notable about this case isn't that the facial recognition got it wrong. It's that we found out.
Parks has now become the face of an issue researchers and privacy advocates have been warning about for years: facial recognition in the hands of law enforcement.
When we talk about the number of facial recognition scans unfolding in the United States every day, we don't even know the full number. You can have people who are being sent to jail wrongly who never know that facial recognition played a role in their arrest.
A 2019 federal report found widespread evidence of racial bias in nearly 200 facial recognition algorithms that were far more likely to misidentify people of color than they were white people.
What is the effect of the data that you're putting into an AI to train it?
The training data, pretty much the images that you use to teach the model, end up affecting how the model will perceive a new image that it's never seen before.
Raji is a researcher who analyzes racial disparities in facial recognition software.
If you keep showing a model a very specific type of face, it will distinguish different faces using very specific features. So it ends up maybe focusing on attributes of a face that don't really distinguish faces of a different culture or of a different skin type. In the case of some of the products that we tested, which struggled with performing well on darker skin types.
So just real quick on, there was some real falsities in that report. They made it sound as if when the report, all 200 algorithms, you know what I'm saying? I heard them say in there, no, they looked at 200 algorithms and some of them did not perform well, but they did not word it that way. So I want to make a disclaimer right here. I am in no way against facial recognition. Facial recognition is an extremely important and valuable tool for law enforcement. And it was an absolute game changer in the NYPD, and it's a game changer throughout the United States. There is a slight problem that we're not shining a light on with facial recognition that I hope to be able to shine a light on in our conversation right now, and it's easily fixable. Let me walk you through Nijeer Parks real quick. What happened here? So this guy not this guy, but a perpetrator goes into that Hampton Inn and starts doing some petty larceny stuff, stealing things from the shop in there, water and something else. And they call the police, and the Woodbridge police show up. And when I looked at the video of this incident, what I can tell you from the video, and the video at the scene did not produce an image suitable for facial recognition, but you could see the characters. The video shows the perpetrator speaking to the two police officers that show up. And when you look at it, Ron, the perpetrator is significantly taller than the two police officers. So keep that in mind. The police officers take the individual's ID. When they advise him he's going to be placed under arrest, he two-hand pushes one of the officers, runs out the back door, throws his water bottle on the floor, pushes the door open with his hand, leaving a palm print, and leaves a shoe behind as he runs out. Size 12, jumps into a vehicle, takes off, nearly runs over one of the other police officers that are responding for backup. And then they find the car, a rental, about 2 miles away, damaged and abandoned. Inside the vehicle, they find a receipt from a Dunkin' Donuts in the Bronx, probably, I would say, I think it was 2 hours before the incident. So why am I giving you all this information? There's a lot of evidence in this case that can be investigated. So what happens here? The perpetrator left his fake ID with the police officers, and the police officers believe the photo on that ID is the perpetrator they were speaking to. So they submit that to an outside agency for facial recognition analysis. They submit it, and then the lead comes in a couple of days later, identifying Nijeer Parks as the potential suspect. Now, a typical lead, I don't know if I gave you a picture of what a typical lead looks like, but a typical lead usually has a disclaimer on the top that says, this is just a lead, this is not probable cause to arrest, and what have you, which we think, and everybody else thinks, cops read. And to some degree they may, but those two side-by-side images can be very suggestive when they receive it. So even if the lead had that disclaimer on there, the communication between the person who created the lead and the person who received the lead did not indicate that this was a lead. It indicated it was a match. And the email went out basically stating, I got a strong hit on your case involving that officer. And I would say within 15 minutes of that email being sent out, the case detective responds back, quote, "That's him." How much of an investigation was done in that 15 minutes? I don't know. Did the investigator even open it up immediately? You know, but the investigator opened it up, looked at it, and said, "That's him." Then he responds back to the analyst who created it and said, "How did you identify him so fast?" And instead of saying, "Hey, you know this is not an identity," they says, "Well, we use this new algorithm. It's really powerful," and yada, yada, yada. Once again, kind of giving that unofficial confirmation that this is an ID. This detective gets complete tunnel vision in this case. Now, remember all of the evidence we have. He did not have to leave the desk. Nijeer Parks is 5'7" tall. Ron, I'm 5'8". I've never towered over another man in my entire life. I'm taller than some, shorter than most. And so when you look at the two officers there at the scene, this guy was significantly taller. This was not a 5'7" tall person. Nijeer Parks has a size 9 foot. That shoe is clearly a 12. The palm print, we got information on the we got a latent print off of the door, and we got a DNA sample from the water bottle. So rather than waiting for the fingerprint and the DNA come back, that case detective swore out a warrant based on the facial recognition and locked up Nijeer Parks.
What about another piece of evidence?
Yeah, the Dunkin' Donuts receipt 2 hours prior. They never did a canvas at that Dunkin' Donuts for cameras. There's just a lot of investigative missteps, and I'm not here to knock them, but this is, and to everybody listen to this, please. This has nothing. This doesn't say anything about that detective. What the point I'm trying to make here is why did that detective get tunnel vision? What happened here? This is a human being, and he could not see anything else. It was blatantly obvious. There was a million signs here that point to this is not the guy. What happened here? And this is what I'm trying to prevent. I'm trying to promote education to those case detectives. Those case detectives need to be educated on facial recognition. They need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of facial recognition. They need to understand face morphological analysis. They need to understand the probability or the potential for producing a doppelganger. This could be 99% the person. This could be 100% not the person. And you won't be able to tell just by looking at the two photos. You need the importance of doing a thorough investigation is, I can't understate it. And to call it merely an anonymous tip serves only to protect the person who created the lead from civil liability. And it's like asking the detective to treat a salmon like a sirloin steak. And they're two totally different things. You can't treat it needs to be treated like a facial recognition lead. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on this, Ron? I'm talking too much.
Yeah, no. Again, you know, what you've established, what the patrol guy in the NYPD has established, and what, you know, it's pretty much the minimum norms is that it's a lead. It's not probable cause in any way, shape, or form. Why the judge would sign off on an arrest warrant, I have no idea. And, you know, again, even if, you know, you're looking at the photos, like you said, you're just looking at a photo. And then there's the obvious disparity in the height, the shoe size, you know, that would pretty much automatically, because even if the cop's looking at the photo and the cop says, yeah, that's the guy, because it's a very familiar, you know, you look at those pictures side by side to the naked eye without being trained, like you said, in those particular points in the face that you need to look at and zooming in on different parts of the face to show that the nose is actually a lot flatter and wider than Nijeer's is more narrow. You know, when you just look at those side by side photos, you know, to the untrained eye, it's like, hey, yeah, that could be the guy. And to a cop that was involved in a job, and again, we're human. We don't have photographic memories where we're going to be able to picture somebody in just like blink of an eye and say that's the guy. Listen, those pictures are pretty damn close.
Yeah.
And you look at that, but like you said, there are some obvious investigative steps that aren't, you know, and again, an arrest warrant is signed. They don't even like do an investigation into him. They don't bring him in for questioning and then realize that this guy is 7 inches taller or shorter, and the guy's got the tiny feet. He's going to tip over. You know, he's got a size, you know, would you say an 8 or a 9 as opposed to a 12? It's a big difference.
HFL 737. Patience versus pressure to close the case. My analysis showed when I looked at these 12 cases that pressure to close a case was a huge contributing factor in these 12 cases. Some of these cases were really important to that agency. And that lead was the only thing they had. And they wanted closure on the case. So it's a good call out.
Yeah. And Detective Nolan says the same thing, you know. The tools used by any investigator are only as good as the human using them, you know, and that's where the failure lies, you know, where you're taking these shortcuts. And so, yeah, it's, you know, once his lawyers, now this guy gets locked up, right?
Yeah.
And
I'll walk you through it from here if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so he gets locked up. I can't remember how many days he did in jail. I think it's somewhere around 15. So I'm thinking 15 to 19 days he's in the can. What I do know is the only everybody on the call is going to hate me right now, but the only reason why he did get released was due to bail reform. Because bail reform was just introduced at that point, and they released him. So this is that one case where I would agree with it, you know, where it matters. So he gets out due to bail reform, but this gets even uglier, guys. You know, what winds up happening is the fingerprint hit comes back to another person. The DNA comes back to another person, to that same person where the fingerprint came back. And yet they still didn't drop the case on Nijeer. They still continued to negotiate a plea with him. And then finally, when he says, I am not taking this plea, when he made that confirmation, they finally just dropped the case on him, and then he hired an attorney and got a significant monetary award on this particular case,
which he deserves, to be honest. You know, Steve W. Squad commander is notified in all FIS matches. They should be in the case review. Again, this is not an NYPD case. This is a Woodbridge, New Jersey case. So, you know.
Yeah, 100%. We have a much tighter process in the NYPD. we have a very, very, and we do have a case that went wrong in the NYPD. So we're not fail-proof.
But we have
a much tighter process.
We have two that we're going to discuss, and they both failed for different reasons.
Read Ralph here.
So Ralph Salento, who's your partner in the facial recognition training, as well as one of the is he a co-owner? He's a co-owner, co-founder of the Key. No, of the Key.
No, the Key. I don't know what his I have no idea what his relationship with the Key is.
And because he was on the Finest Unfiltered with John and Eric. Funny guy.
Yeah, right. If you want to watch a funny show, watch that one.
Yeah, watch that one. And that was the longest interview they did with anybody. And it could have went on for a couple more hours, Ralph. But he was part of this, because you guys actually would, testified as expert witnesses in this case, correct?
Yeah. So Ralph was the hired help on this one. Ralph actually went out and canvassed at Dunkin' Donuts, like the true detective that he is, and found video that could have potentially been viewed by those case detectives had they gone out there.
There's
a lot of comments coming in. There's a lot of opinions on this, and it's
and
I'm happy that we're stirring up a little bit of conversation, quite honestly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's listen, we do on the executive perspective. We're not all about negativity. We're not all about bashing people. We're not sitting here. We do a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking, and when I describe Monday morning quarterback, it's necessary because what we're doing is we're evaluating things that happened, and we're looking at these things and trying to see what went wrong, highlight what went wrong, highlight what went right, but we're not highlighting what went wrong to highlight the person that made the mistake, but just the mistake so that it doesn't get repeated in the future. And that's what it's about. It's about making it better and helping people out there in the field to navigate the job, navigate the traps, so that they do a better job, a more informed job, if we can do that. Again, because this is a podcast, it's not a newscast. I couldn't do this show with Rob. Rob and I couldn't do this show on our own because we don't have the corporate knowledge. We don't have the expertise. Joe is on the show today. Joe is our expert in this field. Ralph's in the comments. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people that are watching due to the way that we promoted the show. And fine, please, if you're watching, right now there's over 300 people that are watching the show. The majority are watching on X. Listen, if you want to get into the conversation, please jump over to the YouTube channel and jump in the chat, the interactive chat, and we'll no problem bringing you into the conversation, answering questions that you have on the topic. So it's best if you can get into on the YouTube side of it, because it's just you can see everybody's comments, everybody else can see your comments. If you're only on X, even if you look at the comments, you're only looking at comments that are made through X, which we haven't had any yet. So, slide over to YouTube. I always emphasize that because the interactive chat is a big part of the the executive perspective. Sometimes we make a complete left turn due to a comment or a question that comes out of the chat, and we get totally derailed. Last week, Rob and I got derailed for a half an hour talking about Commissioner Tisch, and that's fine, because listen, it's a live show, and that's what happens, right? So we encourage the comments, we encourage opposition,
It's blowing up. It's
Tom's taking care of us. He's watching on X, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Well, we're not on Instagram right now, so we're getting 5 views from him simultaneously. Listen, it's about, like I said, it's about getting you involved in the conversation. And listen, Eric says it, and I'm a true firm believer of it. This is a First Amendment platform that we're on with the Finest Unfiltered, and one of the original hashtags from Eric that I used to joke around with him is opposition meets opportunity. So we're not here to ignore opposing opinions. We welcome them. So if you have an opposing opinion, or if you have a question that you think may be controversial, hey, throw it out there. Things that Joe is saying are going to be controversial to some in law enforcement. They think that we're being negative towards law enforcement, and we're not. And when we're going to talk about these NYPD cases, we're not talking about these, listen, mistakes were made, intentional mistakes were made in some cases, and somebody else shouldn't make that mistake, thinking that it's okay, because it's not okay. And that's all it's about. That's all it's about. It's not about getting personal. It's not about being personal. It's not about trying to blow somebody up or blow up their name. We're not giving out names of people that did anything wrong. We're talking about cases. The names of the victims or the perpetrators or the people that were misidentified and falsely arrested, their names are out there for the public. You can Google these searches and look at the cases a little deeper if you want. But, you know, this case, like you said, is just, you know, and listen, the NYPD case is there's some glaring similarities to it, you know?
Definitely.
And, you know, again, some basic police work here could have avoided a lot of turmoil, could have saved the city money, you know, the city of Woodbridge or the township of Woodbridge or whoever had to pay out. But it's also, you know, the Nijeer Parks was put through a lot. You know, his life was upended. He was arrested. He had to, you know, hire an attorney to help him out. And, you know, it's not a good look when we get sloppy. You know, people don't understand police work. We're trying to help people that don't understand it to understand it. But a lot of times, even people involved in police work, you know, that old saying, you know, knowledge is power, is so true. You have to have the knowledge. You have to know what you can do to effectively do your job. And that's what Joe's trying to do here, is trying to just educate people. You know, listen, this is what he does for a living in one of his businesses and ventures, and we're getting it for free. You know what I'm saying? We're getting it for free today. You know, from Joe Courtesis. And but it's about trying to help. It's not about trying to get any. Believe me, he's got enough work. He's going out throughout the country. He's not looking to pick up any contracts with anybody or anything like that. This is the general knowledge for people out there that need to know the right thing to do, the right way to do it, the right way of going about it, because we have a lot of power as police. We have the power to take away people's civil rights, and it has to be taken seriously. And when you're going to do that, you have to do it under the proper authority, and you have to do it by building the case properly. Not having you gotta avoid that, like somebody said before. I don't know if it was Detective Nolan or somebody else said that, you know, or it was Housing for Life. You know, that pressure to close the case. Mm-hmm. It's always there, but you can't bypass the basics. And this, to me, is just egregious. And you know, a lot of basic steps just weren't followed. You know, you hit the facial rec and you're like, hey, I got my guy.
Ralph Salento does a great job of explaining the phenomenon that happens to an investigator in cases like this. And it all falls under that cognitive bias category, where the officer can suffer from defensive avoidance, where that, you know, clearly the detective in this case suffered from defensive avoidance. He blocked out anything other than that lead and tunnel visioned right at it. But there's also emotional bias. I don't know. Look, I worked in the squad for 2 years as an investigator, and you get emotionally attached to some cases. I had a church burglary pattern. We got up to 30 church burglaries before we caught the perp. But you want to know something? I thought it was my case. I thought I was going to get kicked out of the squad because I couldn't solve this. I really did. Had I got a facial recognition lead, you know, somewhere in there, like, how would have I reacted to that? Would I, you know, I don't know. You know, I don't want to sit here and badmouth another detective. Emotional bias plays a role. What if it was a 6-year-old girl that was raped?
Yeah. What's
your emotional bias into this case? So this is, and thanks for pointing that out. This is not a business adventure for me. I'm really sincere about this. Like,
yeah.
If you ever come close to arresting the wrong person, or if it ever, God forbid, ever happened to you, you don't live that down. Like that stays with you for the rest of your life. So, you know, let alone the problem of the person getting arrested, you got to live with that too. So,
yeah. And I'd ask Ralph to join us, but we don't have 4 hours for a show today.
He's
I'd love to have Ralph on. I'd love to have
He's
Ralph on another night.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else with Nijeer Parks?
No, I think we settled that case. I think point was made. We can look into a couple of other cases if you want and see if there's any similarities in the problems.
Yeah, we're going to get into the NYPD cases, and then another case that's just a little mind blowing too. The Angela Lips case. But listen, we're an hour and 15 minutes into the show. Let's hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Get the algorithm going. We find, we talk about this. Tommy brought it up last night on the 10-4 Tavern. Another great show last night. Another great interview last night. It's just it's strange. We're at like 180, almost 190,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Wow.
And for the Finest Unfiltered, for all three shows, for the Finest Unfiltered network. And you don't see the views that you would think line up with that. And that's because I think we get pushed down in the algorithm because of the topics that we talk about. Police-related topics don't do well in the algorithms with YouTube. So the more, likes, shares, and subscriptions we get, and the notifications that we can get people to do, it helps with the algorithm. And then also, if you're watching back on the recorded episode later, if you go where the comments are, and you can hype it. You can hype the show after it's in the recorded episode. So we just ask you hit the like, share, and subscribe. Like I said, we're doing really well with the subscribers. We really appreciate that. That's everybody out there getting the show around. Last night, another great show with Tommy. Am I missing something? I'm not in the comments right now. The former U.S. Secret Service, ASAC Paul Ekloff, who's on a lot of presidential details. But another great show. But again, the algorithms, it's just a little strange. So let's hit that like, share, subscribe, and get going. We'll only get back into the comment. Are you laughing at a comment that I didn't?
I'm laughing at Ralph. He's talking about change the subject to men's suits. And
they talked about that. Was you watching the show last night? Because I brought up Stewie the suit guy. Remember him?
Yeah. I still have some of his suits in my closet. You kidding me? He'd sell you a suit and then he'd be back next week to see if you wanted another one. And I'm like,
Yeah. So Tommy Joyce, former squad commander, cold case squad, and any boss applying pressure to solve a case is ignorant, selfish, and lacks empathy. Short win with a high risk of a shit stick. Let the detectives do their job. 100%, Tommy. 100%. That's, we talk about it all the time. A big problem with policing, I won't even just say NYPD, but with policing in general these days is the lack of leadership and the lack of leaders, not just supervisors, because we know there's a difference between a supervisor and a leader, right? You're a supervisor by virtue of your title. That doesn't make you a leader, right? You need leaders that are going to stand up and protect their people and let them do their job and do their jobs effectively. So if they're getting pressure from the borough, right, their overhead command on cases, you got to be able to say, listen, they're doing it. This is what they're doing, right? They're doing A, B, and C, but we can't jump from A to E. We got to do B, C, and D in between. So,
and look, the pressure doesn't stop at the borough.
No,
that case gets pulled for Comstat, and it becomes the most important thing in your entire precinct. And then the pressure on that squad boss to have some answers on that case. Listen, we're not going to stop pressure. It's going to be there. It's just how do these detective investigators and the detectives react to that pressure, and are they aware of the potential pitfalls of facial recognition when they're processing those cases? And that's all I'm trying to educate people with right now.
Right. Yeah, no, appreciate it. So I'm just trying to catch up. Like I said, no, there's all right, let's move on. I'll catch up in the comments when we're watching the next video. But we've been talking about, we're going to bring up two NYPD cases, and again, both of these cases failed, but they failed for different reasons. One was a misidentification, like we've been talking about, and the other was people doing what we call an end around and circumventing the system and trying to get cute with the system, which ultimately fails once you get to court and you have discoverable material and you did things that were outside the guidelines and the best practices of the department. So the first case we're going to talk about is Travis Williams, who was identified through facial recognition, spent 2 days in jail. And this gentleman, just like Nijeer, he was 8 inches shorter than the perpetrator and 70 pounds lighter. And let's just take Travis. There we go. Let's take a look at his video that was up in the news.
Angry, I was stressed out.
Travis Williams spent 2 nights in jail, accused of flashing a woman near Union Square in February, a crime he says he did not commit.
The man they were looking for, he was 8 inches shorter than me and 70 pounds lighter.
The only similarity, they were both black men with locks. But Williams tells me officers falsely arrested him anyway 2 months later using the NYPD's facial recognition technology. Prosecutors dismissed the case last month after Williams' public defenders, the Legal Aid Society, were able to prove he was falsely identified. Williams was actually driving from Connecticut to Brooklyn and was 12 miles away from where the incident reportedly took place.
This could have very easily been solved by just really traditional police work.
In a letter to the Inspector General for the NYPD, the Legal Aid Society is demanding an investigation into what they describe as an alarming problem of false arrests based on facial recognition. The organization claims the NYPD is relying on facial matches sourced from outside its approved photo database, and that the NYPD is relying on other city agencies like the FDNY to do what the police department is barred from doing.
We have been banging the drum about the NYPD's misuse of facial recognition from day one.
The NYPD says facial recognition technology has proven successful, and in a statement added, even if there's a possible match, the NYPD cannot and will never make an arrest solely using facial recognition technology. Albert Fox-Kahn is with the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. It's working to abolish systems of mass surveillance.
Because of the bias in who gets arrested in New York, it's going to disproportionately target, Black and Latinx and Asian individuals.
Williams says he's still facing the effects of his arrest.
I was in the process of becoming a correctional officer on Rikers Island, and because of that, they froze the hiring process. I hope people, don't have to sit in jail or prison for things that they didn't do.
And the FDNY just released a statement essentially saying that they work with the NYPD to investigate crimes, and they do use facial recognition technology as part of their many tools, and that when they do so, they always follow the law. For now, we are live.
So,
Yeah,
I lost for a second. It's a little confusing with this because they ran this story and they kind of meshed it with another case that we're gonna get into, Ahmed Zudi, but so it was very strange. And actually, when I was reading the story, I thought that the NYPD went outside the guidelines, worked with the FDNY to identify him, and they got a misidentification using other technology and other avenues. That's not the case at all. With the Travis Williams case, there was a facial identification match. He was arrested on that. And again, sloppy police work. The investigative follow-up wasn't there. Where the ball got dropped in the real-time crime center facial investigation section, facial recognition section, investigators, we don't know, because I couldn't find a deep dive, because every time I found an article, it somehow meshed into this other case with Ahmed Zudi, where the NYPD collaborated with the FDNY. We're going to get into that next, but this case, so we don't know exactly where the investigation went sideways.
Well, I got a bit of a theory on it. I mean, we can unpack it just a little bit. First of all, this in no way am I indicating, and that article was really harsh and report was really harsh on the NYPD. And I want to put out, man, from everybody I know that use facial recognition, the NYPD has probably one of the most solid processes for how they execute this. And this one case does not reflect on the entire organization. However, there were some mistakes here. And remember, when we say it's just a lead, there is always a possibility that that lead is not the perpetrator. It's, that's what makes it a lead and not an identification, quite frankly. So because it got out of the facial identification section and was not the person, it was that investigator's responsibility to prove that out before they ran out with a pair of silver bracelets and invited somebody to jail. So once again, this goes sideways at that investigative level. The facial recognition did what it was supposed to do. The facial recognition found a potential lead in this investigation. Usually which is odd here for the NYPD, usually the facial identification section would have noticed that 8-inch difference. That was something they would normally catch, but in this particular case, they did not catch it. Still, that was no excuse for handcuffs to be put on, because there's a whole lot of additional steps that need to be taken by that investigator. What I would assume happened here is that an investigator may or may not have received facial recognition leads from FIS before, and they've always been on the money. And now we're all getting this defensive avoidance. We're getting the lead and we're running out on it. And we just need to say, pump the brakes, slow down. Let's get these detective investigators trained on how to vet this lead. And let's get some check boxes of what they should be doing. Every time you have one of these, let's check off of some of these boxes. These are easy boxes to check, and all of these problems will go away. That's just my 2 cents, Ron.
Yeah, no, I agree. We talk about it constantly on this show, is that when people are dogging facial recognition and the use of facial recognition, and the civil libertarians, those on the left, you got that lawyer, well, it's going to be disproportionately used against Black and brown because that's the majority of people that are arrested in New York City. But again, we'll get into do we need to get into the conversation of, well, look at the percentage of victim descriptions that are given versus the people that are arrested. And so, yeah, are there proportionately more Black or brown people that are arrested? Are there proportionally more Black or brown people that are accused of doing crimes by crime victims? So, okay, like I said, we just looked at 2 cases of 2 of the 7, was it 7 or 9, African-American cases nationwide, one in Woodbridge, New Jersey, one in the NYPD. It had nothing to do with bias against Black. It had to do with not following procedures. It had nothing to do. Like you said, it may have been some type of, other types of bias, but not bias against Black or brown. It's, people taking shortcuts and not following the procedures. And we say it all the time, where people get themselves in trouble, and people say, oh, well, the NYPD, this. Well, we have the policy and procedure in place. It's a matter of training and following that training. So having the knowledge is power, having the knowledge, and then having the ability to apply that knowledge in your day-to-day work. And constantly, even with when we discuss tactics and we discuss, use of force and things like that, people question it. It's on the books. It's just people aren't following their training. They're deviating from their training for one reason or another.
Because they're not getting any training, Ron.
Well,
There is zero training on how to vet out a facial recognition lead. And
but in the NYPD, there is training, and the only ones that are supposed to be doing that are the people up in the real-time crime center.
Agreed. But that case detective still is the one who's going to have to endorse the decision to whether probable cause has been established on that. So
through their boss.
Yeah, through their boss, but through they hold some responsibility with that as well.
100%.
And I want to just circle back on that disproportionate comment you had made here. That that attorney in that video, what I believe the point that attorney was trying to make was that Black and brown people are disproportionately represented in the mugshot databases. That's what I think they were saying. And I don't disagree with that statement. From what I know about the mugshot database, I would have to say they are correct. They are disproportionately represented in those repositories. However, there's a simple fix for that too. Why don't we just allow law enforcement to search DMV photos, and then you'll have the correct proportion to the community, exactly the way it's read out. So it's a simple fix, but nobody would ever go down that route.
Yeah. Speaking of DMV photos, that pushes us right into the next case. Now, this is not a case of misidentification. This is a case where we'll say the fruits of the poisonous tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, people understand the fruits of the poisonous tree. If you obtain evidence and you do it in an unlawful manner or against guidelines, you circumvent the rules and regulations of the department or procedural, court procedures or basic law, whatever evidence garnered from that is poisonous, is not applicable at this point any longer. So I just found this case by reading the Travis Williams case, and there was a link to the actual court case because it said in this case, and I clicked on it, and I'm reading it, and I'm reading it, and I'm reading how the case went bad, but then they're talking about a ginger and how they identified him using Clearview AI through the fire department from a high school. I'm like, wait, a ginger. It literally took me a while to unwrap and unravel that they intertwined these two cases to talk about the NYPD circumventing the rules in order to get an ID, and they made that sound like that was the way it happened with Travis Williams when it absolutely wasn't. That was, failure to do the proper investigation on that investigative lead of a facial recognition quote unquote hit, right? But on this case, an NYPD bypassed facial recognition ban to ID a pro-Palestinian student protester. So with this case, right, the Legal Aid Society accused the FDNY of running facial recognition searches that fall outside the legal limits of the NYPD policy, citing a June case that found that the NYPD used the FDNY to skirt regulations by identifying a subject of a misdemeanor protest case. It was an assault case. It was actually a felony assault that was dropped down to a misdemeanor. The original case, he hit somebody with a rock or something. Protest case using Clearview AI and DMV photos. So there's the link in this case, right?
Yeah.
This is from the original article of Travis Williams. It's weird. This is cut out of the original one. That's why it was so confusing. The court decided that law enforcement officials had misused facial identification and AI tools to illegally extract and alter surveillance images, and as a result, pinned the misdemeanor charge on the protester. So we discussed this, and we don't know exactly what they meant by altering the surveillance image. Did they just clean it up? Change the hue and the contrast to try and get a clearer picture, whatever the case. Nobody is saying that this was a misidentification of the perpetrator, that Ahmed Zudi wasn't the one who assaulted the person at the protest, the pro-Palestinian protest. Nobody's saying that. What they're saying is that the NYPD did an end around. And there were emails that were back and forth that were in the case from the case detective and a fire marshal. Now, the FDNY fire marshals are police officers under the criminal procedure law. They have all the statutes, all the powers of police officers, even though they're firefighters, they're fire marshals, but they have police officer status. So they conduct investigations into arsons. Now, the FDNY has the authority to query DMV photos. They have the authority to use Clearview AI in their investigations. They're not limited like the NYPD is. So the thing on this case that gets to be, for lack of better terms, a little fugazi, right, is that initially in the court reportings, and this is where guys get themselves in trouble, they get themselves on the Brady lists because of statements that are inaccurate. There are conflicting reports in the discovery from the case detective and from the assistant district attorney where they say that the fire marshal saw a Instagram post from the NYPD on Crime Stoppers, and he took it upon himself to run the wanted poster through Clearview AI. Now, the judge wouldn't have had a problem with that because his capacity as law enforcement, if he on his own saw a wanted photo and ran it through Clearview, that would have probably, I don't know if it would have held up in appeal, but this judge said in his brief that that would have been okay. However, in discovery, there were emails back and forth between the case detective and the fire marshal. And the fire marshal said, hey, it was good talking to you earlier. That was the opening to the first email that they have. It was good talking to you earlier. About that Instagram, blah, 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 blah. Now they get into, I did this. So there was an inference that they had spoken about it prior, like, hey, could you do me a favor and run this through your systems? Then there was a back and forth. That's our guy. I don't have a name. Oh, I'll run it through DMV. They ran it through DMV, and that's how they identified the guy. But they also, like I said, they used the Clearview AI. And this is like a screenshot of the identification from the protest. And then this was actually from a high school formal where they Clearview AI made the match from. So like you said, Clearview AI has, scrubs all of the internet and creates their own database, their own proprietary database. And so they got a hit through Clearview AI. The fire marshal did, because the police department, we're not allowed to use Clearview AI. We're only allowed to use the arrest and parole photos. So had the fire marshal on his own found this and his capacity as a police officer status, and then just reached out to the case detective, it might have went a different way. But the case winds up getting thrown out because of improper procedure, because of that inference that they spoke about it beforehand. And then the fire marshal queried both Clearview AI and the DMV photos. And now my question,
I need to understand that. How, right off the bat, I had no idea until right now that they queried the DMV photos.
Yeah.
How did the fire marshal get access to the DMV database?
They, according to the article, they have access.
That's interesting.
His email said that oh, get me the name. I'll run it through I'll run it through DMV, and they have access to the DMV files. Now with the NYPD, you worked in the squad, you have to get a subpoena.
Yeah, even if I got a subpoena, I would have never been permitted to do a facial recognition search through the DMV database. That agreement needs to be approved by the state of New York. So I just, how does it, is the fire marshal a state employee? Could that be the answer?
FDNY.
FDA. Well, you said it was a fire marshal though from FDNY.
Right. FDNY fire marshal under the CPL, they have police officer status.
City status or state? Yeah, I get. Well, listen, if he's a state employee, I don't know, but this is my first time I'm hearing that DMV, and it went right over my head, and that concerns me. I'm going to look a little deeper into that. I want to unpack one thing real quick before I get into the Clearview. The other thing, and it might have slipped you, is in the headline that you put up before. Yeah. Look what they're saying here, Palestinian student protester. So what they're trying to say here is that the NYPD violated First Amendment rights by providing some type of a surveillance tool during an organized protest. That's what they're trying to say right here.
Well, that's the clickbait on the headline.
Yeah, and that's not what happened here. Just because you're at a protest doesn't mean you're allowed to break the law. This guy was at the protest and broke the law, and now this went from being a First Amendment protected protest to being a criminal investigation. So I'm going to put that aside right there and get rid of that terrible headline.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
and again, I found this just by doing my own little. Like, I'm reading it, I'm going, Ginger, we're talking about a guy with dreadlocks, and they said that the only similarity was the dreadlocks, and now you're talking about Ginger.
Yeah,
it made no sense to me, you know? But the article had pivoted and didn't even tell you. So the whole article was misleading in so many different ways. But it brought me to this, which is an interesting twist and another problem in the use. We talked about earlier that we don't have the authority to use Clearview, but apparently the FDNY does. They have a contract with the Clearview. So, and again, if the judge said, if he just saw the warranted poster as a police officer, used the tools available to him to try to help another police officer, and then send it over, hey, I found this, he wouldn't have had a problem. But that inference of, hey, it was good talking to you before.
Yeah. It reeks that the detective potentially bypassed the NYPD procedure to not utilize databases outside of mugshots and parole photos, and went out to an outside source to try to get this guy identified. You know, look, when you're dealing with these paid protesters, which this kid probably is, I hate to sound cynical, when you're dealing with these paid protesters, they may or may not be in our mugshot database. They're likely not from our.
He wasn't.
Yeah.
In this case, he was not in the database. He hadn't been arrested. He wasn't on parole.
So it would make sense for that detective to say, "Let me look into a broader database to see if I could try to find this person." Clearly, they didn't find him. I'm getting the impression if they in fact did search for DMV, which I'm finding questionable. I have a feeling that might be an error in the reporting.
No. It was very clear.
Yeah.
It was in the emails.
Yeah, crazy.
It was in the emails. And I'll try and, go ahead.
It's all right. I believe you. Look, I'll tell you why I'm so surprised by it. The DCPI one time asked me to do an interview for the Wall Street Journal on facial rec when I was still on the job. And I protested. I said, I don't think we should do this interview. And he said, why? I said, I have like 4 FOIA requests out for facial rec, and we're fighting those FOIA requests. Why am I going to do an interview with a journalist and talk about things that I have protected in the FOIA request? So we reviewed the FOIA request, and he's like, speak about everything except the stuff in the FOIA request. Well, during the interview, Ron, when I got to the databases and I said we use parole and mugshot images, the journalist said to me, you don't use DMV? And I said, no, I don't use DMV. And he goes, really? He goes, I thought NYPD used DMV. And I says, no, we don't. And he goes, why not? And I said, well, we don't have that agreement with the state, and we don't have permission to that database. He goes, really? I thought that you did. And then he asked me a stupid question. He said, would you use him if you had him? And I said, well, of course I would use him if I had him. It would be a huge advantage to us, but we don't have him. So if you Google me and Wall Street Journal, the headline of that story is NYPD wants DMV photos. And when that article came out, Albany was calling me, who are you dealing with over here? Who authorized you to do this? And I'm like, no, that was a misquote, So I just remember the craziness that I sparked up just by accidentally implying that we used them, rather than this guy saying he used it, which I'm finding strange.
I'm gonna do what I don't normally do. Hold on one second. Talk it up for a second.
Yeah. No, so on the Clearview end, I believe there was probably some type of communication between the detective and the fire marshal. I'll give you another example. So a lot of people are not allowed to use Clearview. For example, the Biometric Information Protection Act of Illinois bans any law enforcement in that entire state from using Clearview AI because the images came from some type of a social media. However, if you remember January 6th, when the January 6th incident happened in our nation's capital, I do know through a very good source that most of those people were identified using Clearview AI. Those agencies were reaching out to agencies that had access to it, and they did this exact same go around or workaround to try to identify them.
All right, here I'm gonna share my screen. Like I said, I hate doing this, but this. Let me get rid of that. You're not gonna be able to see it. It's too small. But basically, right here, it says within minutes at 5:49. Fire Marshal G, again, using his FDNI email account, sent the detective 3 uniform source locators, URL links, to an archive of school play photos and one to Clearview AI, artificial intelligence face result, and one to Ossining High School, prom photos on Smug Hub, and wrote, I can't find any social media for her, sick, meaning him, other than the Smug Hug link I included. If you get a name, I can get the DL photo for you. We have access to that.
Now stop right there just for 1 second. Does this sound like a lead to you, or does it sound like an identification?
No, it sounds like an identification.
Damn straight. This is the language bias I'm talking about.
The next minute at 5:50 p.m., the NYPD detective replied with the defendant's name, his date of birth, and his 9-digit client ID, also known as a driver's license number. 4 minutes later, the fire marshal sent one word, unpunctuated, replying, bingo. The next email in the chain appended was sent 11 days later with fire marshal wrote, saw the news, good work, glad you grabbed him, because 11 days later he was collared.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Now, in this particular case, it happened to be the subject. But had this been a doppelganger or a strong lookalike, can you see the defensive avoidance now happening here? Based on that conversation, the fact that he identified the client ID number doesn't necessarily mean that he ran them through the DMV database. They just found his they went into NLITS and got his image from his government ID. Because you got to remember, when you're searching through Clearview is your social media ID. Like that's 92 Charlie and Fire Detective. These are their social media IDs. I'm sure they have government IDs, which would be their legal name. And you can't draw up a search warrant to arrest Fire Detective. You're going to need a little bit more information there.
Yeah. So that was a question that I had, was if you have a facial recognition suspect and your guys vetted out, would a judge write a subpoena for a DMV photo?
Yeah, I would always get if you ever needed a DMV photo in the NYPD, you came through the Real-Time Crime Center. We had the access. I can get you a DMV photo from 35 of the 50 states in the United States. That's what we had access to through a program called NLITS. So yes, I could get NYPD DMV photos anytime I wanted. I just couldn't search the database with a facial recognition algorithm.
Gotcha.
You understand? So there lies the confusion here, I think.
So if you have a subject and you want to use the DMV photo instead of what you pulled up from facial rec, you could get that.
We did it all the time. In fact, we would use DMV photos for the photo arrays sometimes, because it's a controlled image. Sometimes we didn't have a mugshot.
Right.
We had a perp identified, and the only picture, they might be a sealed image, so we can't use that. So in order to use a legitimate image, the detectives would reach out, request a DMV photo, we would send it in, and it would be utilized in that investigation. That is allowed. We're allowed to do that. There's a stipulation in those guidelines that allow us to navigate the DMV photo database for criminal investigations. But and that stipulation in that DMV, some states leverage that stipulation to run an algorithm over the entire database. They justify it with that. We got pushback when we tried to do that, because they said, hey, wait, that stipulation was written in like 1972 before facial recognition was around. So we weren't able to do it.
And somebody just texted me a question that saying that what would they say? I'm assuming that you guys don't have access to APHIS. We do, but the fingerprints are totally different.
Yeah.
Fingerprints are totally different. Fingerprints, if you have a fingerprint, you have physical evidence that you're going to run through the database. That's
making a great point here.
Yeah, that's biometric. That you have a fingerprint, you're going to run it through the fingerprint database. Whereas you have a photo. Photo is not, you get a hit with a fingerprint, you have probable cause.
Yeah. So no, that's a great point. So when there's two different type of investigations that happen between a fingerprint match and a facial recognition lead. And let me explain the difference. If you get a fingerprint, latent print from a church, from a pew in a church, and it comes back to Ronnie Layson, the question isn't, does that print belong to Ronnie Layson? It's Ronnie Layson's print. The investigation is Ronnie Layson the perp who burglarized that place? Because there's millions of people's fingerprints can be at that location legitimately.
Right.
Now, the difference is if you get a photo from that church burglary and that photo comes back to Ronnie Layson, the question is that photo Ronnie Layson? It's not confirmed yet, but we know the perp in that photo is the one who committed the crime. That we know. So it's a little bit of a different investigation. And what happens is some of these detectives outside of the NYPD, when they get that facial recognition lead, they're getting that lead from the same person that gave them a fingerprint hit, from the same person that gave them a DNA hit. And they're conflating the two technologies, and they're running out the door with silver bracelets in their hand. And it needs to be separated, and we need to somebody stay out of the church. Yeah. So, but that's it. I mean, interesting case, and it plays into the Angela Lips case. If you want to pivot, that's up to you.
Yeah. We're almost 2 hours into it. Well, you got some stamina. I know it's been a long day for you at work, but
I got it.
You got some stamina. You signed on for it. You love this shit, so it's great. I love it too. I love getting it out there. So Angela Lip is a case that we brought up earlier, where she's a grandmother who lives in Tennessee, and she was arrested after a facial recognition hit in Fargo, North Dakota. So let's take a watch. I got a short video on that case, and then we'll discuss how we'll try to discuss what the heck happened here.
What do you say, Ron? You know, so somebody, you know, the details in this case are very consistent with NYPD is a bit of the anomaly here. In the majority of these cases, almost all of them, what went wrong was the agency that made the arrest did not own or operate facial recognition technology. They didn't have it. It wasn't in there. They had no policy for it. But the issue was they received the facial recognition lead from an agency that does have it, like the Nijeer Parks case. The Woodbridge Police Department didn't own or operate facial rec, but they received it from the state police or another unit, actually. But when they get it from that particular outside source, there's a bit of a disconnect. They don't understand what went into it, or what is the email communication saying, like similar to that last case, makes it look very confirmatory that this is the potential suspect. And that's what happened in this case as well with Angela Lips. The Fargo Police Department received that lead from another police department who had, I believe it was Clearview AI. They received that. I don't know the circumstances or the potential language associated it.
Just to cut you off for a second, I just want to emphasize that we're not dogging Clearview AI.
No, absolutely not.
Clearview AI did nothing wrong with.
Absolutely not.
Like, they didn't have illegal photos in their database and in their algorithms. It was the improper use of their well, in the NYPD case, it was the improper use of their database, and in this case, it was the use of it. And then again, not following up and using it as an investigative lead and taking it as almost probable cause.
Great call out, Ron. This has nothing to do with Clearview. In my opinion, Clearview is one of the best products out there, in my opinion, quite honestly, and I've seen them all. This has to do with the cat is out of the bag. Facial recognition is not going anywhere, Ron. This is the new world we're in, and it's going to be part of policing for whether we want it or not. And I personally do.
We have to.
Yeah, we have to. Which brings me to the point is you should not be able to become a detective unless you receive some level of training on what to do with these when you receive them. This is telling the detective to treat this like an anonymous tip is fucking bullshit. Is what I'm saying, is a bullshit excuse to caveat and protect yourself from a lawsuit. Well, we told them, we put it in writing on the top, treat it like something it's not.
Yeah,
unfair. And then you leave the detective out there to hold the bag when all of this shit goes wrong. Yeah, you can put the caveat on the top, but what's the communication in between going on?
Do you have that lead that we looked at earlier? Because I don't have it. I didn't get it.
Which lead are you talking about?
The one where you send out the possible match lead.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll let me see.
You can either send it to me, or if you want to share and do it that way, it's up to you.
Yeah. Well, keep talking, and I'll find a way to get it to you.
Yeah. I mean, this woman was dragged, from Tennessee to Fargo, North Dakota, and spent 2 months in jail when there was cell phone data would prove, or would, I don't want to say prove, but there would be evidence from her cell phone data that she wasn't there. And the lawyer said it. I don't know why it took 2 months for her being there for it to come out through her. She had a public defender. Maybe that's the reason why, that there wasn't a priority to them, and they didn't understand the software, and they didn't understand why it was an investigative lead, and not really understand that it isn't an actual, it doesn't establish probable cause. And this grandmother was taken, and then to boot on that case, as we know. Listen, once they realized the fuck up and they dropped the charges on her, it was like what, Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, and they just released her with no way of getting home from Fargo, North Dakota, back to Tennessee. So, like, they didn't even do the right thing, you know? It just, listen, you have to own up to your mistakes as well. We are human. We make mistakes. And once things are acknowledged that a mistake was made, you gotta somehow mitigate it. And by just releasing this woman, you know, like basically open the door and go, yeah, sorry, you're free to go now.
I sent you an email
Okay.
that you can pop up if you want in regards to this, just to kind of demonstrate what a typical lead looks like when an officer receives one, when a detective receives one. And I actually utilize this example when we train people on how to properly follow up on an investigative lead. And I don't know, did you get it, Ron, or no?
I did. I got to drag it over.
Okay. But no, this is an unfortunate case, and it plays into the fact that this is not a bias issue. It's not an algorithmic bias issue. These algorithms are very strong, and they potentially can produce very strong lookalikes, and simple investigative process will help. So when I do the course, I reach out to the team, to the group, and I start asking everybody in the audience, take a look at this lead. You've just received a lead. I want you to look at it and tell me what you see. And immediately, everybody focuses in and like, wow, I love the teardrop tattoo. Or look at the tattoo, on the neck, the ear, the left ear. Look how it protrudes out. And they focus right on that comparison. You know what they're not reading, Ron? They're not reading the red caveat on the top at all. They're laser focused on the side by side. When I go through the room, not one person points that out. And it's not about it's not about lazy investigative work. It's we sometimes we expect too much from human beings. Treat this like an anonymous tip, Ron. I dare you. Figure out a way to treat this like an anonymous tip.
It's impossible.
Impossible. So you can take that down. But that's just the point that I wanted to make on that. It's unfair and it's irresponsible, and quite frankly, it's self-serving to tell the detective to treat that like an anonymous tip. It's hey, I'm washing my hands from this. I told him it probably isn't the guy on an official piece of paper, but when I was on the phone or when I was typing in my emails, I said something completely different. So
yeah, we're at just over the 2-hour mark. We have 470 people watching on all different platforms.
Wow. Nice, we picked up.
Again, majority on X. So if you're watching us on X and you want to get involved in the conversation, we're winding down. We're going to basically do an overview of where things go wrong at this point. But please jump over on the Finest Unfiltered Network in YouTube, the Executive Perspective. Click on the link. Join us in the conversation on YouTube. It's a way to get involved. Like I said earlier, if you're familiar with the show, if you're a first-time follower with the show, it's great. We love to see new names in the chat. We love to see the old names. We love our HFL and Detective Nolan and 92 Charlie, Mikey Shea. You've been involved in the comments tonight, and we got Marlon Bethel, part of the Finest Unfiltered show, at Fire Detective. A lot of guys in here that are our regulars, and we love to see the new names too. And again, you have a question, you have a comment, you have a concern, get in there and we'll do this. You guys need a Thursday show, you and Ralph. Hey, you know?
I couldn't keep up. Ralph is, Ralph would have me laughing the whole friggin' time. Every time I'm with Ralph, the shit I hear come out of his mouth.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, I recommend everybody jump over into YouTube so you can get involved in the chat. And you can see the chat. You're not going to see the chat that's going on in YouTube and what we're talking about when we're referencing things if I don't bring it up. So, and HFL is saying, it's not forgetting what we did on April 1st. At the end of the show, I announced that it was our final show as an April Fool's joke.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember. Actually, you had me fooled. I'm like, well, wait a second. I thought I was supposed to be on next week. I really did. I'm like, what the hell happened?
So, all right. So let's just recap. With this. Go ahead.
So, I put this slide up for a reason, because why is this happening? We can turn around and say very easily this happens because of lazy detectives and supervisors that don't do what they're supposed to do. And I'm going to beg to differ a little bit. Why did these detectives ignore that warning? Why in these 12 cases did they ignore that warning that this is not a positive ID? Well, I'm going to submit to you, how does a facial recognition lead compare to traditional leads? If we're just calling it just a lead, well, how does it compare? Let's take a look at other leads. What about a size 10 Timberland boot print outside of a window of a burglary? How are you treating that lead versus a partial license plate from a vehicle? You're treating these leads differently, correct?
Yeah.
Look at the two facial recognition leads above. Are you going to tell me that those leads are equal to that boot print? And here's where I'm going to throw a caveat at you. These are 4 different people right here. This is not even the same person. So this is not only a lead, this is a bad lead. But yet, if you have no facial recognition experience, if you have no facial comparison experience, if you've never learned the basics of face morphological analysis, if you don't understand the basic steps that could, or the phenomenon in cognitive bias that could affect you in a lead like this, it's extremely problematic. When we looked at all 12 cases, what did we find out that they had in common? Well, in every single case, the case detective lacked any experience whatsoever in the facial recognition process. Every single case. There was a couple of cases where there was a tremendous amount of pressure to solve the case. That's why I was happy to hear somebody put that up there for. I think HFL put that up. There was a fixation in every single case with the side-by-side. They focused solely right on that and got tunnel vision. Cognitive bias played a role in every one of them. In 3 of the cases, the detectives conflated facial recognition leads with fingerprints and DNA. How do I know that? I'm taking an educated guess here. Because in those 3 cases that I looked at, that detective received the lead from the same person they received the fingerprint and DNA hit prior. So I'm thinking they conflated these technologies. In some cases, like the Nijeer Parks case and like the NYPD case, and they ignored blatant exculpatory evidence. I mean, it was sitting right in their face. This ain't the perp. No guidelines whatsoever on what to do with a facial recognition lead. And this is my favorite one right here. We do not own facial recognition technology, therefore. And I wrote that in there because none of them had a policy for facial rec. And when I said, well, would you consider putting a policy in for facial rec? Well, we don't own the technology. Why do I need it? No, you are who needs it. You need it more so than the one that actually has it, because if you think, and I'm speaking to everybody out there on this call right now that's still active, any chiefs that might be watching, if you think that, and you do not own facial recognition technology, if you think that your detectives are not getting facial recognition leads, either your head is in the sand or your detectives suck. Those are the only 2 possibilities here. This technology is not going away. I don't care what policy you write that they can't use it. They're going to receive it. Make sure they're going to receive it unsolicited. like in the case in the NYPD, if that's true, where the fire marshal proactively just did it, they're going to receive it unsolicited, and they're not going to ignore a lead in their case. So get these guys protected. That would be how I would close this, Ron.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I'm getting a text. It would suck to be one of these 12 people. It would listen. It's horrible for these 12 people that were misidentified and arrested, and that is true. Sometimes we're going to make those mistakes of the heart where we're following through and we still make a mistake. We followed the steps, or we inadvertently missed a step, and it happened. And then that person absolutely should be compensated just as well as anybody else. Well, I don't know about just as well as anybody else. They should be compensated, right? And they will be. All of these people, all these 12 are being compensated, I'm sure, very, very handsomely. But to be one of these 12, and again, like Ralph said earlier, people are dogging facial recognition technology, and it's not the technology that's the problem. It's not the technology that's the problem. It's that even when there is policy in place, like the NYPD, and it's being circumvented or ignored for a quick closure or for whatever reason, that's where it's problematic. And those are the mistakes of the mind. And those are the ones that are always more troubling. So, yeah, those 12 people, listen, things happen. People go out, and it's different when you're on patrol, right? I'll use this analogy because the person that's texting me is a civilian. When you're out on patrol and you have Joe Courtesis called 911 and said, Ron Layson punched me in the face, and my face is red, my lip is bleeding, and he's saying, Ron, and I lock up Ron. And then we find out Joe was lying. That's not a false arrest, right? I had probable cause because I did my due diligence as a police officer. I did my inquiry. I have a credible witness, victim, who's saying Ron Layson did it. I go out and I lock up Ron Layson. And I haven't seen her on for a while, but to Lily's point earlier, and that's a point where you could take Ron Layson's photo and show Joe Courtesis and say, is this the guy that did it? And you're like, yeah, that's Ron. I got promoted with that asshole to every rank, and he punched me in the face. But now Joe's lying, but I'm not on the hook for a false arrest. Now the city's going to wind up paying out anyway, probably, but I'm not on the hook for false arrest because I did my due diligence. I established probable cause, right? I got a victim with an injury who says he knows the victim, or who knows the perp and who did it. I lock up the perp. Whereas you have an investigative lead that's not being used properly. And again, we talk about this all the time, where policies are in place, they're not being followed, and people wind up getting themselves jammed up and problems incur. And with this, it's not just an administrative oversight where the cop takes a shortcut and does something they're not supposed to do on the job, and they get themselves in trouble administratively. You're now seriously affecting someone else's life. That's my rant.
Great points. Great points. I've been ranting and screaming about this, Ron, for probably a good 6 years right now, trying to drill this point home. And stop beating me up.
Yeah.
I don't think it's laziness. I don't. I mean, yeah, could it play something in here? Joe is 100% correct that the technology is not going away. Damn straight. It's not going anywhere. I think, look, laziness always plays a role in everything. Cutting corners is an issue, but if you don't understand the technology, and you have more faith in it than you should, it's a problem.
It's not even the technology, Joe. It's the policy that's in place.
Yeah. Well,
You don't even understand the policy
the-
that's in place.
how the technology works. You need a
Yeah.
basic understanding that this is not a fingerprint hit. The caveat on the top is not enough. I demonstrated that to you all. I guarantee you almost nobody saw the damn caveat on the top when I put that thing up there. It's not enough. We need to educate them, and I think we can do it. I'm positive we can do it. It's simple. It's the engine light is on, Ron, and it says your oil is low. Let's put some fucking oil in the car. It's literally that simple.
Yeah. And again, you're not looking for any kind of contract. You know, the NYPD has their own training bureau. The detective bureau has their own training. The detective bureau has their own training staff. They just need to push this out and properly train their staff on policies and procedures that are already in place.
So,
all right. Listen, I think you have anything else on this before we'll start to close it out. I'll ask you to join me in the Ask an Executive segment again. See if anybody has any questions or anything like that. I think we've come full circle with it, and we've highlighted what the issues are. And in every one of these cases, it wasn't the technology that erred. It was human error in one way or another.
The technology
and
did what it was supposed to do.
We need to do better. So we'll close it with that. Listen, I appreciate the conversation. Each week, our final segment is Ask an Executive, where Ron and Rob answer questions from the chat. I forgot to put up the Ask Ron and Joe. I was running a little late. So a lot of people don't have access to NYPD executives. Here you have access to 2 retired full inspectors. And we're here to answer any of your questions on topic or off topic. There were no questions during the show that I noticed. So if anybody has any questions for myself or Joe on topic, off topic, about NYPD or police policies, throw them in the chat for now. And we'll put them out there. So Delray 53, he's always quiet during the show, and he always comes on with questions at the end. So Delray is saying, have you ever seen a situation where a freshly minted captain, right out of captain school, became a precinct commander?
They're trying to rile us up, Ron.
Hey, listen, they do it all the time. But honestly, right out of BMOC, out of captain school, I haven't seen it where they get assigned from captain school, which is, we call in the NYPD, we call it BMOC in every rank, even though it's basic, command leadership, advanced leadership, and then command leadership. But I haven't seen anybody go right from there assigned to a command as a commanding officer. I have seen people go right from captain school to back into a detail as a commanding officer of a detail that they came from, or that they're getting hooked up with because of, and a lot of that has to do with, their expertise. In our captain's class, there was one guy who wasn't even in class, and he was a 2-star chief. He was a 2-star chief in a year and a half.
In captains, and I was sergeant, lieutenant, and captain. He didn't show up. That guy was. I never seen somebody hooked that good, man. That was insane.
And he's still hooked up with them. I'll tell you off the air about that. But yeah, so you do see things like that, but not. I've seen people with next to no time get commands once they're out.
I've seen within 6 months, multiple people within 6 months of getting out of captain school, getting out of BMOC, getting that, and then 3 months after that, getting promoted.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. And Detective Nolan, when will the NYPD arm the drones?
Nah, I don't think that'll ever happen.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen either. QC Beast. Do transit and housing COs do the duty in their patrol borough or just for their respective bureau? So I was a captain in housing, but It was different because it was SATCOM, Strategic and Tactical Command, Brooklyn North. So I did it in Brooklyn North. But when you're housing or transit, it depends, because housing and transit a lot of times cover multiple patrol boroughs. Like when depends on where you are. Your PSA could cover, like PSA 9 covers Queens North and Queens South, right? PSA, other, transit districts cover Brooklyn North, Brooklyn South, Manhattan North, Manhattan South. So a lot of times the chief of department is the one that controls where you're doing your duties technically. So a lot of times you'll pick the borough that you're going to do them in. And then when you're an outside bureau person, depending on how each borough does it differently. You go in seniority rank. It doesn't matter that you're from housing. And when the calendar comes around, you pick your duties that you have to do in the patrol borough. Whether you have transit coverage or housing coverage is up to the transit bureau chief and the housing bureau chief. And they are separate and distinct from the patrol duties. You're responsible to do the patrol duties in the patrol borough. And then housing could have housing coverage. They don't really do it as much, but transit absolutely has transit coverage, where you're the transit captain and you're covering transit for a tour. And those are different from your housing duties. All right. New York City, as a head of a command, do you speak to your officers as a group when the mayor is quick to negatively react to an incident involving officers without full investigations, or do you stay mum? Go ahead, Joe.
I fortunately never had that situation during my tenure. When I was a precinct commander, I was done being a precinct commander under Ray Kelly. So none of the people, you know what I'm saying? So that
things were a little different.
Yeah, things were a little different. I can't recall an incident where that happened. I could be wrong, but I can't. So it's definitely a challenge now. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I as well never had the mayor or the police commissioner come out and condemn an incident, not even just in our command, in the police department as a whole, come out and condemn an incident. And he may New York City might be speaking of an incident that was posted on social media today about a narcotics unit that got into a violent tussle, taking somebody into custody, and the police commissioner and the mayor came out saying how bad it is and that they're conducting an investigation. But we're not even going to discuss it. But I think that's where this question is coming from. And as a precinct commander, and like Joe, I was a precinct commander of 2 precincts, as well as the task force, which is now the SRG, and also some units. I would go out to roll call and tell guys, keep your head up, because I did it as a borough commander. When I was a housing borough commander, I would go down, I would talk to roll calls, I would tell them, protect yourself, tactically first, always talk about that, but I always tell them to protect themselves administratively. The job is asking you to do things that you think are excessive paperwork wise, and doing extra reports and these stop reports and all this stuff. Do it. And if you're not available for a job because you're doing it, that's the job's fault. It's not your fault. Don't feel compelled to take shortcuts where you're going to wind up getting jammed up administratively because you don't want to do the report. I'll get to it later, because when you say that, inevitably something happens and you don't get to it later and catch up. Yeah. So if the job requires you, and again, I'm not talking about a slowdown. I'm not talking about to follow the book letter by letter, which maybe needs to happen, but I'm talking about if there are required reports that are definitely going to get you in trouble if somebody drops a CCRB on you or something happens, do it. Just do the paperwork, do the reports. And if jobs are holding, jobs are holding. So that's something before I left, I went down and I used to go down and, Eric Dim, when he was the special ops lieutenant in PSA 7, my office is in PSA 7, upstairs as the borough commander for Bronx and Queens. And I would go down and sit in sometimes when he would do some training with them, and I would talk with them. And I would do some training with them too. I had to do some training with them, for some force stuff. I brought in, an outside unit just to give them a little refresher on things, right? But I went down before I got hurt and got transferred, and I told them, guys, I don't know how you're doing what you're doing. Listen, I'm being real. Mm-hmm. You guys are still going out doing God's work, taking guns off the street almost every night, and I don't know how you're doing it under this atmosphere. But God bless you for doing it, and just keep yourself safe. Listen to what Eric is telling you. Follow the rules. Know the laws. He was very big on case law. Know it, and be armed with that when you go out there to do your job as effectively as possible. But do what needs to be done. Cover yourselves administratively. Make sure you're doing those stop reports. Make sure you're doing, any kind of TRIs or whatever else is required of you.
Yeah, I got to agree. I felt it important to address the officers on making sure that they properly documented, and then also just keeping, you made a great point. Like, how do you do what you're doing? You and I, during my original interview, I gotta be honest with you. I think I would have been fired from the job my first 11 days. I really do, and I'm not even trying to be funny about it. It just, if there were cameras following me around that first 11, for my entire tenure as a police officer, I would have been fired. And not that I did anything wrong in my mind. It was just the appearance of the way we policed back then. Wouldn't have looked well on a video. No.
Police work is not pretty.
It's not pretty. Good police work is not pretty, man. I really like that. And so when I would speak to the officers, even like on like the 4th of July, if you're going to think about this, if you're going to approach a group who are throwing off fireworks, now a lot of community members are screaming and yelling they don't want the fireworks, but an officer is going to go into a crowd where that's happening, and what do you think is going to happen? Some off-duty cop is going to badge him and tin him, and then they're going to walk away, and I'm like, dude, you're going to be on video jamming yourself up and somebody else up when something like that happens. Like, do not get caught on video. I mean, that's a stupid example, but everything looks bad.
You were the CEO of the 106. You're going to say there was some fireworks in the 106?
A little bit, man. A little bit. It was. I think we put on a better show than Macy's.
When we were cops, they always told us, act like you're on video at all times, right? When they talk about integrity and the way to do the job, treat everybody as you want your family treated. Listen, the reality is everywhere you are today, you are on video. The cell phone camera. This camera is better than any surveillance video that was ever in the 90s when we were cops.
Any camera I ever had in my life, it's better.
Yeah, it's crazy. You are on the Ring and all these other cameras. Every Tesla is recording you when they're driving by. They have the cameras all around the car.
Yeah,
people don't realize this. You're being recorded no matter what.
I wouldn't even know how to guide them through this. I really wouldn't.
It's really tough.
Because I know I would have failed. So who am I to give advice on this?
All right. 92 Charlie, fellas, what's your opinion on the video of the 2 Brooklyn North narcotics detectives who were modified that were trying to subdue and arrest a perp? I didn't know they were modified. That's the video I was referencing before. Joe hasn't seen it yet because I talked to him about it just before we went on the air. I'm not going to get into it. I know that Sal Greco put out a post that it got a lot of legs. I know that John Macari from The Finest Unfiltered went on an X Live and discussed it. I am sure that John Marlin and Eric will be discussing it at length on their Friday roundtable at 08:05. Right now, listen, we're 2 hours and 31 minutes into it. I'm not going to start even discussing it. Listen, police work does not look pretty. Hands-on police work does not look pretty. Were there things wrong with that I saw? Yes. As an executive, am I concerned with some of the actions that happened? Yes, I am. The tactics, just the optic. I don't want to use the word optics because I don't care about optics when I'm looking at effectiveness and cause and reaction. But there are things that are problematic, and those guys are going to have some issues. But you know, the whole thing is ugly. The whole thing is ugly. How it came out is ugly, and it just, I think the way it was thrown out, and was it going to get out anyway? It was going to get out anyway, but just the way that that a lot of negative police interactions are being put out in a negative fashion by Sal and his network is just it's disheartening. It is. So I'll leave it at that. Let me scroll down. Detective Nolan, how long must an NYPD captain be in rank before getting deputy inspector money without being promoted? You never get the money. You're at the captain, so you get captain. Just like everybody else, you get steps in your salary increases, but you max out. When you talk about getting deputy inspector money, that's only in your pension. So if you're a captain, not designated as a deputy inspector, and you retire after 5 years, between 5 and 9 years, you get deputy inspector's pay. Base pay is where your pension starts. If you're a captain and you remain a captain for 10 years, even if you become a deputy inspector within that 10 years, when you retire from 10 to 15, 14 years, you'll get a full inspector's pension. And then the recent change that Roy Richter, God rest his soul, got for us was if you are a captain, because remember, captain is your last civil service title. So if you're a captain for 15 years, even if you make deputy inspector or inspector like myself and Joe, if you make 15 years, then your pension is based at a chief's salary. You never get the money while you're active.
So, for example, Ron and I retired as full inspectors on the job, but we both retired with deputy chief pensions. Correct?
Correct. Yeah. Which is just the base. It's not, there's no cash overtime and everything else. So that's how that works. Now people think that we make zillions of dollars, and we don't. Del Rey's on another one. Do you think a precinct commander should be confined to one rank rather than a captain, DI, or full bird?
No.
I'm not sure. Do you think a precinct commander should be confined to one rank? Right? No, I don't. I think that I think it depends on where you're working. It really, the old A, B, and C houses is a real thing.
No, I'm gonna bang. I'm gonna do a chest bang right here because that's the cred for DI and full bird. You agree with me, Ron? I don't know. I'm not knocking anybody that hasn't taken that road. That's fine.
Yes.
But in my opinion, to some degree, you have an asterisk next to your name. Anybody could be a precinct commanding officer, but nobody wants to do it. That's a really tough job.
I wanted to.
Well, I don't say want it. It's when you join the police department, you want to be, me personally, I want to be involved in crime and solving crimes and investigating homicides. And when you're a precinct commander,
I wanted to be an E-man.
Driveways and noise complaints and think about what you're dealing with 24 hours a day.
Personnel
with the crime, personnel issues.
Personnel, and that was the worst.
There's a lot that goes into this, and it takes a toll on you.
Absolutely.
And it takes a huge toll on you as a human being. So, no, I disagree. You deserve a promotion based on the effort that you sacrificed your life for your community or for the community that you're serving, this is a chest pounder for me. If you're above the rank of captain and you had a command,
I was a captain. I was a captain for almost 9 years before I got promoted. I got promoted in my first command at the 111 precinct. I was the first person ever promoted at the 111. 111 was always the first command because it's a slow command, right? And then you wind up going to another command for a year or two before you get promoted. But I had done things before. I was the blast CO. I was the task force CO. And so when I went to the 111, I was there for a year and a half, and I got promoted and then moved to the 110. And then I got promoted to full inspector while I was in the borough. But no, you shouldn't be confined to one rank. And also, I have no problem with the CO and the XO both being captains, because even though you're the same rank, there is still a rank structure, and the CO is still the boss.
I agree.
Let's see. We'll keep going. And you see if any other questions. 92 Charlie. Early 90s were different. I came out the class after you guys, February 94. Hey, you just missed the tests. That February 94 class,
That's
man,
right.
You guys missed the test by like a month and a half.
That's right.
Yeah, we hit the test just right time-wise. So let me see. Welcome. Feel for the men and women out there. So do we, 92 Charlie. So do we. I'm not going to get into the comments about another show. Just looking through this. Over under when the Brooklyn. It's a good question. It's a good question. When you watch, I'll send you the link after, Joe.
Yeah, I'd like to look at it.
I had said that in our Finest Unfiltered group chat that I think that the mayor is going to push for an indictment, and I think it's going to be an indictment of the violation of the diaphragm law. That's what I think. Do I think it's applicable? Do I think it's appropriate? I don't think it's appropriate. There's no way to take.
I don't know anything about this. Did the guy die? Like
No. He got opened up a little bit. I'll send it to you. It's like 5 or 6 minutes, and the guy wouldn't comply, and he wound up being the wrong guy. Oh, Fronty, P.O. Fronty. Yeah. Oh, P.O. Fronty changed his name. That's he was diecast before. Now he's at the finest 25. P.O. Fronty.
This guy and his partner Tony DeFede, these guys were 8-3 legends, man. Just the real police out there. I admired them so much when I came out. So it's nice that he's proud of me. My God, these guys were my heroes when I was on the job.
Good to know. Good to know. All right, so that's what we have for today's show. So we really appreciate it, Joe. Listen, I appreciate you coming on. I know in the show description we have links to the 3SI, because you briefly mentioned that you're the which I don't want to get your title wrong. I know you're a vice president, but
yeah, I'm the senior vice president of the law enforcement division for 3SI.
Right. That unfortunately the link didn't work for your facial recognition investigative course, but they could just Google facial recognition or just FRIC, F-R-I-C, and if you Google that, it'll come up. Your LinkedIn as well. For some reason, the link didn't take when I put the show up, so you can just Google Joe in LinkedIn, and that's probably the best way of getting in touch with Joe. If you have any
absolutely the best way to get in contact with me. I'm on that a lot.
And then here, you want to throw?
Yeah.
Throw this
those of you, if you guys want to attend tomorrow, I'm doing a webinar, really on leveraging a path from retail to law enforcement. So we created a path where retail can now send live video during an incident. Not only retail, but anybody, banks, retail can send live video to the responding officer as they're responding to the scene, so you're not responding blindly. So if you guys got time to tune in tomorrow, it's a really great discussion from the Gainesville, the Loss Prevention Research Council out in Gainesville. It's run through the Florida State University, home of the Gators. They do a fantastic job of demonstrating all the latest technology, and they invited me to be on this webinar tomorrow. I would love to see you guys attend.
So it's great. All right, good. All right, so I have one personal shout out before I close out the show. I want to say happy birthday to my mother. Tomorrow is her 82nd birthday. So, Mom, I love you, and happy birthday. So,
happy birthday,
Mom becomes part of the show sometimes. It's funny, and then the guys will jump in. But all right, so go back and take a look at the 10-4 Tavern last night. Again, that was Paul Eckloff, U.S. Secret Service. And now he's in the private sector talking about waste in government. So thank you, everybody, for the birthday wishes for Mom. She just sent the hearts. She's watching. Somebody was breaking my balls last week about my mother watches the show. I'm proud of that.
If I would have known, I would have watched my language at the very least. You should.
No, don't worry about it. You don't got to worry about it. My mom's old school Italian. She's fine. She's heard it all.
All right.
But yeah, last night, 10-4 Tavern, Paul Eckloff, great interview, funny guy. Got a little. They got a little off track on. It was funny talking about making their own beer, and you know, they were getting very technical. And I put in the chat, "You lost me at hops," you know, or barley or something. And you know, it was funny. It was some people knew exactly what they were talking about, so it was great. But then he got into his days in the U.S. Secret Service. He was on the presidential detail and into you know, now government, you know, investigating government fraud and things like that. Yeah, they talked about suits too, Detective Nolan. You're right. They talked about the suits that the Secret Service guys are wearing and whatnot. So good stuff, good show as always on the 10-4 Tavern. But next show in the Finest Unfiltered Network lineup is Friday morning 08:05 will be the Friday Roundtable with John, Eric, and Marlon, fire detective, who's been in our chat all night. I'm sure they'll be discussing this incident with the narcotics and as well as local politics and anything else that's going on in the NYPD. Like I said, John did a live ex-post live a little earlier. If you want to go to John D. Macari's X, you can check that out. He gave his opinion on the case thus far that we know about. I'm sure by Friday we'll know some more. There'll be some newspaper articles, and we'll know the status. Like somebody put in here that they got modified so far. So I'm sure they'll be talking about that. Then they'll be back on Monday, Wednesday of next week, and then on Tuesday at 7:05. Pete will be back. Pete was off last night. He'll be with Tommy Joyce. And next week, they're going to have the firearms tool mark examiner, Stephanie Lohr. She's a ballistics expert with nationwide consultancy. She's a gun crime intelligence. It'll be a gun crime intelligence conversation. And she's one of the very few females in the world doing this work. So she's kind of a badass. And then Tom had to run his kid's soccer practice, but Joe, he said to tell you he misses you. I miss you. Okay, so we really appreciate you joining us. Then I'll be back with Rob next week at 5:05 p.m. on Wednesday. Again, Joe. Before we, Joe, I'll give you the last word. I thank you very much for filling in for Rob. And listen, great conversation. I think it was a great conversation. We have over 500 viewers right now on all the different platforms. Hope the show does well on the replays, because it's an important topic that a lot of people need to hear. But thank you, and I'll give you the last word before we sign off.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for giving me the platform to preach this important topic. I want to make sure that these officers are never going to put themselves in a situation where they're going to have to live with themselves for arresting the wrong person. It's easily fixable, and I'm happy to hear we had over 500 live listeners, and I'm sure that a lot more will jump on afterwards, and so I do appreciate it. So thank you very much for giving me this platform.
I appreciate it. All right, Joe, just hang out for a couple minutes, and
Sure.
I'm just going to close out the show. So everybody, until next week, thank you very much. Be safe, everybody.